Joining me now is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Stanford medical professor, and Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry. Mr. Attorney General, now the lawyer representing the doctors in this case said that this represents the most severe abrogation of the First Amendment in modern times. Why'd you agree with that sentence?
Look, I agree with it. I mean, look, I've always said that there's a line that defines us as citizens from being subjects, and that's the Bill of Rights. And so the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth, all the way through the line is what keeps the government from basically infringing upon the rights that we have as citizens. And what is happening here is that the government, instead of the government censoring that speech, they basically are creating and colluding with private actors that basically become arms of the government to censor that exact speech. And that's the suit that we have in Louisiana with Attorney General Eric Schmidt. What we believe is happening is that the government has basically colluded, informed, told the big tech exactly which things to put up, which things to take down, which things to amplify, and what they should be hiding from the American people. And that's just not what the First Amendment was designed to allow the government to do.
Well, yeah, you had
that's
Fauci.
A violation of the...
Yeah, we had Fauci, I think it was just a couple of days ago, saying that basically if we get another pandemic, we didn't go far enough before, Dr. Bhattacharya. And that sentiment was echoed about a year ago by Vivek Murthy, who's now the Attorney General. Watch.
The sites have recognized that this is a challenge, and they've stepped up to do some things to reduce the spread of misinformation, and I credit them for that. But it's not nearly enough, because there's still a tremendous amount of misinformation circulating.
Obviously, Surgeon General, God help us if he was the Attorney General, Dr. Bhattacharya, but that's chilling, that we needed to go further, and Fauci basically says the same thing.
I mean, some of the worst misinformation has come out from the CDC. For instance, that there's no immunity after COVID recovery. A whole bunch of other really poor piece of information, like about the effectiveness of masks and so on. I mean, I think the problem here is that these government entities tried to create an illusion of consensus about all of these supposedly scientific points that didn't actually exist. There never was a consensus, Laura, about lockdowns. There was a tremendous dispute in the scientific community about it, but they wanted to create the illusion that there was, fool the American people into thinking that there was, so they could get their way.
Well, back in February, the New York Times reported that the CDC hadn't been publishing large portions of their own COVID data, citing fear that the true vaccine data would be quote, misinterpreted or correctly interpreted as the vaccines being ineffective. Now, Mr. Attorney General, when you see stuff like that, it just seems like this was never about the accuracy of medical information coming out. This has always been about control of the human person, period.
Yes, that's exactly right. You've hit it right on the nose, that this is about control. And that's what the First Amendment was designed to keep the government from being able to control its citizenry through misinformation, which is what the government's doing. Instead of allowing information to flow readily across the country, instead of allowing Americans to look at that information and determine for themselves how to interpret it, the government is doing it for you. That's a violation of the First Amendment, as you know. But what they did was they went out and then used private actors like big tech to do their dirty work. And that's what the suit says. And as you know, when those entities, when those corporations engage with the government in conduct that would otherwise be a violation of the First Amendment, then now there's a linkage and we have a case.
And Dr. Bhattacharya, I have to get to this. This is another story that we're going to see the same type of stuff going on. The left's one-size-fits-all approach to the COVID lockdowns, we know about that. But then when it comes to this monkeypox, the Washington Post says that sex is a major driver of the global outbreak. But health officials and longtime HIV activists say calls for abstinence don't work. And what about this today from USA Today, which outlines how monkeypox can be transmitted? It mentions broken skin, hugging animals, and leaves out one very important transmission source. Dr. Bhattacharya, why the sudden change here and what this actually is?
Well, I think part of the problem here is the history of HIV. We stigmatized, public health ended up stigmatizing a lot of HIV, gay individuals, and they wanted to avoid that. But by bending over backwards to avoid that, they actually created harm for the gay population. If they just, with compassion and truth, said, look, these activities are putting you at risk, I think most people are rational. They would understand that these activities are putting them at risk. They could have then had more cooperation for vaccination for the high-risk groups. They could have done a focused protection strategy with compassion. Instead, they are trying to do. They made the same problem in HIV. They tried to pretend that everyone was equally at risk. The same problem with COVID. Everyone is equally at risk.
Yeah,
that was a mistake.
The push to get little babies jabbed with the COVID vaccine, right? I mean, the kids with vaccinations who are otherwise healthy. Unbelievable. Attorney General Landry, great to see you. Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you, and good luck with this lawsuit.